So anytime I'm working with CTOs, specifically first-time CTOs, there are two mistakes that I see getting repeated over and over and over. Stick around, I'll tell you what they are and how you can avoid falling into them yourself. Hey, I'm Will Button, and this is DevOps for Developers, where I teach you the skills that you need to succeed as a developer and how to build, scale, and grow your application. So I work with a fair number of CTOs, and there are two common mistakes I see them making early on in their careers. The first is overstaffing, and the second is lack of budgeting. So as a CTO, it's not really a clear-cut job. It can have a wide range of actual skills that you perform on a day-to-day basis, depending on the size of the company you're in, the stage that your company's in, and the industry that you're in. But I see these two patterns getting repeated over and over across all of those. So let's talk about the first one, staffing too early. So now usually this comes into play whenever you are taking a look at your sales forecasts and you're down here and you're expecting your sales growth to take you up here within a certain period of time. So the thought process, which seems pretty logical on the surface, is that if you know this growth, if you know this workload is going to be up here, let's go ahead and hire down here and get those people trained up so that when that work does hit, they're trained and ready to go. Now that fails for a couple of reasons. All right, the first reason is it has to do with something called the S-curve of business growth. So in any business, growth goes through this series of S-curves, right? It's not a linear path. And so the middle of that S-curve is kind of a plateau where you stall in your growth. Now that can happen for a couple of different reasons. It could be that you've hit the capacity limits of your current architecture and you're not able to onboard customers as quickly as you used to. It could be that you've saturated your initial demographic, and so you've either got to expand your line of business into a new customer demographic, or marketing has to come up with a new messaging campaign to reach additional customers in that demographic. And sometimes it happens because of conditions that are completely out of your control, like, maybe a global pandemic that shuts down businesses around the world, because that could happen. I don't know. Either way, it's not going to be a linear growth. So now that comes back to haunt you, because during that plateau period, while you're retooling or reorganizing or creating a new campaign, whatever it is to get that curve going back positive again, during that time, you're burning more money than what you were expecting to come in as a proportion of revenue, right? And in startups, where I spend a lot of my time working, whenever you get to that position in startups, what that means is you're burning capital, and every startup has a fixed runway. They know that our fixed monthly expenses are this amount, and we have this much money in the bank, so we have X number of months of runway to operate our business. But whenever you hit that plateau, all of a sudden your ratio of money burned versus income coming in changes, and it ends up shortening that runway. And as you know, if you hit the end of that runway, it's pretty much game over for the business. So now as the CTO, you're in this position of having to cut back expenses to extend that runway. And the primary way you're going to cut expenses is by laying employees off. So now these employees that you hired early on for growth that you didn't quite make it to, you're going to have to turn around and have the layoff conversation with them, which really sucks. So let's avoid that scenario. Now, the second reason to avoid staffing too early has to do with workflow efficiency, right? Because when you hire these employees early, you're hiring them for growth or hiring them for work that you're anticipating in the future. But meanwhile, you've hired really, really good employees, so they're not going to sit there idly. They're going to try to find something to do. So they'll look around and they'll say, oh, hey, look, here's this thing I can work on. And they're going to start working on it, and time's going to go by, and they're going to make improvements on it. And the product manager is going to be involved, and they're going to see this growth and this progress on this product. And so then whenever the time actually comes for them to do the work that you initially hired them to do, both the engineer and the product manager and possibly other people are emotionally invested in this pet project that they picked up. They look at it and they say, well, we've made so much progress on this. We can't just abandon it here. And so the end result is you're going to end up hiring someone to do the work that you initially hired this engineer to do, because now they're assigned to this pet project that was really never really critical to your business to begin with. It was just something they picked up so they had something to do during the day. And so what ends up happening there is now you've hired two people to do the one task that you initially wanted accomplished. So there's also a hidden benefit to not hiring early as well. So whenever you hold back on the hiring and you still take on that growth, you're actually putting extra workload on your employees. And this is where you're going to have to really rely on your people management skills as a CTO, because your people are going to have extra work that they're doing with fewer resources or with not as many resources as you might like. So they're going to be feeling the pressure of the extra work. So you've got to make sure that they stay motivated and incentivized to continue doing their jobs and feel like they're contributing and they know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. But the reason that you do that is because as you go through this growth, without adding additional employees, those employees are going to stop doing non-essential tasks, which is okay because by definition, it's non-essential. So all of those are just going to get thrown by the wayside, and they're going to focus on the core things that continue to move your business forward. Not only are they going to focus there, but they're also going to make that the most efficient process possible, right? Because they've only got a few people to work with, so they're going to leverage efficiency every single place that they can. So now when you hit the top of that growth curve and you hire additional people, you're bringing people in to an efficient process. And so those people are actually going to magnify the efficiency rather than magnify the chaos of an inefficient process. All right, so let's talk about the second part of this, lack of budgeting. And again, I mentioned I work a lot with startups and I see it amplified there a lot. What happens in that environment is, you're working with just a few people, and so you try to find shortcuts everywhere you can. A lot of times those shortcuts come in the form of SaaS products or third-party SaaS applications, which is totally okay. I'm not against those at all. And actually, if you want a video of how I evaluate whether a SaaS is worth pursuing or not, I'll post a link to the video that I recorded previously right up above here, and I'll also put it down in the show notes. But so here's the thing with SaaS. You'll try out a product and you'll work with it a bit, and then maybe you decide that that's not doing what you wanted it to do, or you think maybe there's a better one available, so you abandon that one and you go grab a new third-party SaaS and start using it. The failure in this process comes with failure to shut down the billing for the first one, because it just continues to show up on your credit card, right? All of these SaaS products, you just enter in your credit card number and they just bill the credit card every month. Now, more than likely, it's going to be on your credit card as a CTO. So finance is going to get your credit card statement. They're going to hand it over to you and you're going to look through and say, oh yeah, this is for that, and blah, blah, blah. And you're just going to work your way through without actually realizing that one of those charges on there is for a product that your team's no longer using. So now you're paying twice for the same service. But here's how you can get out of falling into that trap. So you go ahead and you sign up for the SaaS using your credit card. And then when the statement comes in and finance gives it to you to sign off on the expenses, any SaaS providers that you see on there, you take back to finance and say, we need to pull this off of my credit card and have them start invoicing us on net 30 terms, right? So that does a couple of things. First, it gets it off your credit card. So if there were any fees associated with using your credit card, those are now gone. And the second, whenever you have finance start getting invoices for that product, they'll create a budget item so that they know how much to expect or how much they think that bill is going to be every month. And at the same time, when they pull that off, you're going to tell them that you're not the one who signs off on that charge, but you're going to give them the name of one of the engineers on your team who's actually working on the part of the code that integrates with that SaaS application, and say this person can authorize this invoice every month. So now whenever that invoice comes in, if it's the expected amount, everyone's happy, it gets paid for. If that amount goes up though, finance knows the name of the person on your team who can help them determine whether there was an increased utilization or a change in the billing rate for that product or an error in billing, so that you don't get charged that extra money unless it's actually for services that you used. At the same time, whenever finance goes and sends that invoice over to that engineer, if they ever stop using that product to start using a replacement product for it, that engineer is intimate with the application, they know the code, and they'll look at it and say, no, we're not using that product anymore. We need to actually cancel that service. And so that provides you a complete 360 loop of using the third-party service, budgeting it, and tying it with someone who has actual knowledge of the implementation of that product. So there you go. Two biggest mistakes I see CTOs make. If you like this video, give it a like down below. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe to my channel and you'll be notified. If you hit the notification icon, you'll be notified whenever I release new videos on DevOps skills for developers every week. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.